In March 2006, twin brothers disappeared during a snow hike in the Cascade Mountains. 4 years later, a hunter found a thermos stuffed with human fingers, wrapped in wax paper marked L and M. But when investigators traced the origin to a hidden survivalist cabin, they uncovered a story so disturbing it would change everything and reveal a truth the forest had buried alive. The winter of 2006 came early. In Washington's Cascade Range, spring never truly arrived that year, only a long thaw. On the first weekend of March, Troop 68, a small scout group from Vancouver, set out for an overnight snow hike. Among the group were 13-year-old twins Luke and Mason Hendricks. New to the troop, but known for their stamina and discipline, they were well-equipped, well-prepared, and eager. No one questioned if they could handle it. The route was mapped, the forecast called for light snow, and the plan was simple: reach a forest cabin by dusk, return by noon Sunday. They never came back. 4 years later, in early November 2010, a hunter named Warren Clay tracked a buck into the fringes of Red Fern Hollow, 120 miles south of the original disappearance site. Snow had come early again. He bagged the deer just after dusk, then dragged it to the creekside to dress it in fading light. That's when he noticed the object. Half buried in rotted leaves near the gut pile, a scratched blue thermos, the kind used for soup or coffee, its top dented, flecked with dried mud. He almost ignored it. People dropped gear all the time out here, but something about the way it sat, upright, not fallen, made him pause. Warren unzipped the nylon sheath. The thermos was heavier than it should have been. He shook it once. No slosh. Curious now, he twisted the cap. Inside, a plastic-wrapped bundle, tightly sealed, wrapped again in wax paper. Blood-smeared, but recent. For a moment, he thought it might be bait, some hunter's leftover lure. But when he peeled the paper back, something tumbled into his gloved hand. A finger. Human. He dropped it instantly, stumbling backward, heart slamming. There were more, 8 total, all cleanly severed, no rings. Fingernails bitten short, pale, soft, from a child. Warren would later say it was the paper that made him call the sheriff, not the fingers. It was the initials written in fading red ink on the inside fold. L and M. The same initials hand-stitched into the twins' coat tags. A habit their mother had so the boys wouldn't mix them up. By dawn, the thermos was in the hands of forensics and the forest was sealed. In a concrete lab 2 days later, a forensic tech in Olympia confirmed what investigators feared. Tissue samples matched mitochondrial DNA on file from Marcia Hendricks. The fingers belonged to her sons. They'd been missing for 4 years, and now they'd surfaced in a place no one expected. Back in the Cascade precinct, Detective Colleen Mercer reopened the old search logs. She'd only been a junior officer in 2006, but she remembered the story. The headlines, the snow, the sudden storm that swept through mid-hike, cutting visibility to near zero. The frantic calls from the scout leader, the fragmented radio signal. The twins, she recalled, had last been seen heading downslope to refill water bottles near a frozen creek. But the thermos was found 2 mountain ranges away. What were their fingers doing here? Mercer pulled the topo maps, replotted the route, then cross-checked weather data from the NOAA archives. A name came up, a location: Eagle Hollow Cabin. A known waypoint on outdated trail guides, no longer on modern maps. Abandoned, supposedly destroyed by fire in the 1980s. Except, snow core data from 2009 showed sustained heat presence near that coordinate, not geothermal, wood burn. Mercer ordered aerial recon. What came back was clearer than expected. A structure, partially buried, standing. Smoke scars on one wall. Hand-cut wood pile. Tracks frozen into the ice. Then the dog teams arrived. Cadaver canines, brought in from Spokane. On the 3rd day, one dog froze beside a pile of stones, then lay flat. That's when they dug. What they found wasn't a grave.
It was a smoker, a homemade meat smoker, stone-lined, ash-filled. Inside, buried in charred soot, were fragments, bone mostly, long, hollow, splintered, some no wider than a pencil. And in the pit's far corner, wedged beneath a burned grate, was a molar, juvenile, unfilled, intact. DNA confirmed it belonged to Mason. They'd been missing for 4 years, and now they'd surfaced in a place no one expected. Back in the Cascade precinct, Detective Colleen Mercer reopened the old search logs. She'd only been a junior officer in 2006, but she remembered the story, the headlines, the snow, the sudden storm that swept through mid-hike, cutting visibility to near zero, the frantic calls from the scout leader, the fragmented radio signal. The twins, she recalled, had last been seen heading downslope to refill water bottles near a frozen creek. But the Thermos was found 2 mountain ranges away. What were their fingers doing here? Mercer pulled the topo maps, replotted the route, then cross-checked weather data from the NOAA AA archives. A name came up, a location, Eagle Hollow Cabin. A known waypoint on outdated trail guides, no longer on modern maps. Abandoned, supposedly destroyed by fire in the 1980s. Except, snow core data from 2009 showed sustained heat presence near that coordinate, not geothermal, wood burn. Mercer ordered aerial recon. What came back was clearer than expected. A structure, partially buried, standing, smoke scars on one wall, hand-cut wood pile, tracks frozen into the ice. Then the dog teams arrived. Cadaver canines, brought in from Spokane. On the 3rd day, one dog froze beside a pile of stones, then lay flat. That's when they dug. What they found wasn't a grave. It was a smoker. A homemade meat smoker, stone-lined, ash-filled. Inside, buried in charred soot, were fragments, bone mostly, long, hollow, splintered, some no wider than a pencil. And in the pit's far corner, wedged beneath a burned grate, was a molar, juvenile, unfilled, intact. DNA confirmed it belonged to Mason. The structure above was no ordinary cabin, built by hand, post and beam, reinforced with salvaged iron. A single window, shuttered with welded scrap. Inside, bunk, stove, dry stores. No power. One lantern. And on the table, a half-burned sheet of newspaper dated April 2006. On the wall, hooks. Empty. In a drawer, wax paper, identical to the Thermos wrap. The cabin had an owner. Jack Denning, age 54, former backcountry guide, reclusive, no criminal record, last known address in Enumclaw, Washington. He was still alive. Detectives brought him in for questioning. Denning was calm, composed, even helpful. Claimed he hadn't visited the cabin in years. Couldn't recall who he'd given the keys to. Probably left them now to the post, he shrugged. But the fire pit was fresh. The ash inside still had trace heat. No charges were filed. No confession made.
3 days later, Jack Denning's body was found 12 miles from his truck, face down in a dry creek bed, boots missing, fingertips frostbitten black. Official cause? Hypothermia. Time of death? 48 hours after his interview. He'd run into the snow and never come back. The file was reopened as a homicide. And for the Hendricks family, the waiting began again. What happened in that cabin? And why had someone saved the Fienders? Luke and Mason vanished March 3, 2006. The Cascade snowstorm hit early, 8 hours ahead of forecast. Visibility dropped to 0. The scout group split. The twins volunteered to refill water bottles at a frozen creek. They never came back. 4 years later, Detective Colleen Mercer reopened the file. GPS logs from the original search placed the boys heading east, but NOAA's updated snowpack data suggested they'd likely been funneled west, toward a forgotten ravine. A geologist's 2009 report mentioned unusual melt patterns in that area, a thermal pocket that stayed warm far too long, possibly man-made heat, possibly a cabin. Colleen cross-checked maps, nothing marked. But when drone teams swept the area, they found it, partially buried, cabin, standing, wood stacked, used. Inside, cadaver dogs reacted immediately. They found a root cellar, collapsed. Beneath it, a hand-built meat smoker. Ash filled the chamber. Forensics pulled bone fragments, not animal, human. 1 molar, juvenile. DNA matched Mason Hendricks. Elsewhere in the cabin, meat hooks, cured salt containers, wax paper rolls, identical to the one wrapped around the Thermos fingers. In the wall gap, they found a scrap of fabric, blue, nylon. UV scan revealed faint monogram, L and M. Jack Denning, a former backcountry guide, was the registered owner. He claimed he hadn't used the cabin in years. "You were seen there last spring," Colleen told him. "Collecting game cameras," he replied. "You bought 10 pounds of curing salt the month the boys vanished." "I hunt." "There was no game in the area that spring." He didn't answer. 3 days after questioning, Denning's body was found 12 miles from his truck. No boots, no gloves, fingers black with frostbite. Death by exposure. What made him run? That night, Colleen read an old ranger log. Man carving shapes into snow. Said they were angels. Said they didn't want to leave. She closed the folder. The mountain had kept its secret for 4 years. And gave it back, 1 finger at a time. They'd gone for water. That was what the scout leader remembered best. Luke and Mason stepping away from the trail, plastic bottles in hand, walking toward the sound of moving water below the ridge. It was late afternoon. Visibility was dropping. The snow was turning fast, dry and wind-hardened. They were supposed to be back in 10 minutes. They never returned. Now, in 2010, geologist Carla Nint weaned over a snow core sample pulled less than a mile from where the cabin had stood. She tapped the frozen column. "Here," she said to Detective Mercer, "see the banding?" Colleen squinted. Thin brown-black layers cut horizontally through the snowpack like growth rings in a tree. "Fire residue," Carly explained. "Multiple burns, different woods, human-controlled." "Over how long?" "At least 3 winters." Colleen straightened, meaning the cabin was active from 2006 to 2009. "At minimum," Carla nodded, "possibly earlier." "What about earlier storms?" "That's the strange part," she said, pulling a satellite image from 2004. "There was no thermal anomaly here. Then, bam, end of '06, it lights up. Something started burning. Someone." Carla didn't argue. Across the table at the precinct, the new lead sat chewing a pencil. State Trooper Eddie Fultz, former SAR commander, had taken over terrain modeling. "Here's the part that bugs me," he told Colleen, spreading out his hand-drawn elevation lines. "You know where the Thermos was found?" "Red Fern Hollow." He nodded. "Well, I dug into route probabilities, topography, seasonal flows. There's no way that Thermos got there by natural drift. You're saying it was carried. Placed, most likely. Maybe dumped." Colleen looked at the red circle on the map. "Far south. Too far." "By who?" Fultz raised an eyebrow. "That's your job." Inside the evidence lab, a crime scene analyst clicked through images from the cabin interior. One paused on a wall slat. Rough pine, torn at the corner. She zoomed in. There. Under the burned surface, a carving. Not deep, not clean, but visible. M. Below it, a line. L. Colleen stared at the screen. They were marking time. The tech nodded. Or trying to. Another slide showed a pile of small bones. Not human. Rabbit. Bird. Squirrel. Burned and stripped. Someone had been eating anything that moved. Except, not all the bones matched. The next slide showed a fibula.
child size. Meanwhile, retired park ranger Al Bishop was sitting on his back porch with a mug of instant coffee when 2 officers knocked on his screen door.
"Jack Denning?" one asked. Bishop set down the cup. "Yeah, I knew him." "What was his reputation?" "Good hiker, great with terrain, loner, bit intense." "Did he ever mention kids?" Bishop's jaw tightened. "No." "Did he have guests?" "Never." The younger officer hesitated. "What about the trail, the one to the hollow?" Bishop looked out past the trees. "There's a switchback, not on any maps," he said. "Real old, game trail mostly." "Denning knew it?" Bishop nodded. "He built it." Later that week, an officer named Jamie Kern made the discovery. She was hiking a backtrack path near the edge of the old burn zone when her dog veered toward a tree well, an exposed root pocket under the snow. Inside, half buried in pine needles, lay a child's jacket. It was shredded at the collar, dirt blackened, sleeve torn. But the tag was still legible. Hendricks. Initials below, L and M. And sewn inside the liner, nearly hidden, a number, not a phone, a code. 3082-R. The database hit came back in hours. A Boy Scout registration number. Luke's. Colleen stood at the site later that day, silent, the jacket in an evidence bag at her feet. Behind her, the trees swayed. The snow muffled everything. "Why take them?" she whispered. No one answered. But in her mind, the image returned again and again. 2 boys in falling snow, walking into the woods, thinking they'd be back in 10 minutes. And behind them, something waiting. What made the cabin warm? What made it smoke? What kept the snow melting year after year? Not fire, not just fire. Something darker. Something fed. She'd sewn the tags herself. L on one jacket, M on the other. Just a few quick stitches inside the collars, cheap nylon threads from her kitchen drawer, nothing special. But now those letters were evidence, not just initials, proof. Marcia Hendricks sat at her kitchen table, holding the Thermos photo in shaking hands. The image had been cropped, but she recognized the wax paper. She used the same kind to wrap sandwiches when the boys were little. Same fold, same tear seam. She hadn't touched their jackets in years. At the forensics lab, the cloth scrap from the cabin wall lay under angled light. Blue nylon, singed edges. Threadbare zipper tooth at one end. What caught the analyst's attention wasn't just the stitching. It was what the fire hadn't reached. Embedded in the fabric's underside was a sliver of waxed paper. And on it, in red marker, faint but legible, L and M. They checked again. The ink matched the Thermos. Same stroke width, same fade, likely same pen. Someone had torn the pouch off a jacket, used it to store fingers. The technician stared into the sample tray. "Who keeps something like that?" she whispered. Outside, in a mobile crime unit, Detective Mercer flipped through photographs of the cabin stove. Cast iron, modified. The lower vent had been widened crudely, sawed by hand, then filed down. On its surface, residue marks in ringed patterns. Not typical for heating, but consistent with. Meat processing, a forensic pathologist confirmed. "You're saying this was a smoker?" "Not a good one, but yes. Someone tried to cook inside it." Mercer's throat dried. "And the ash?" "Still being sorted. So far we found human and animal calcination. Rabbits, birds, and 3 fragments that match juvenile phalanges. Fingers?" He nodded. "Tiny, same age group." Mercer didn't speak. "But here's the part I don't get," he added. "Why preserve some and destroy others?" She looked at him. Souvenir. The next discovery came by accident. A second team was combing through a shed behind the cabin. A structure almost collapsed under snow. Beneath the debris, in a rusted bucket covered with old tarpaulin, they found remnants of paint chips, cracked brush handles, and an object wrapped in burlap. A stove door.
blackened, deformed. When placed under the microscope, flakes from its interior surface revealed paint layers: green, red, white. Identical sequence to the one in the cabin wall. This door had come from the same cabin. It had been removed, hidden. Why bury it? Someone asked. No one answered. At the precinct, Colleen reread the incident log from 2006. The Scoutmaster's report had a line she hadn't noticed before. Luke was holding a red water bottle. Mason had a blue one. They argued over whose was colder. Thermoses. Not identical, distinct. She scanned back to the recovered thermos. Blue nylon. The other was missing. What if there's a second one out there? She asked aloud. No one laughed. Meanwhile, the property inventory from Denning's known estate turned up another oddity. A roll of butcher paper, unused, heavy stock, high grade. And inside the roll's hollow tube, a pencil, carved into it. 3406, March 4th, the day after the twins vanished. In a drawer beneath the cabin's window was a final object, a plastic tag. Torn at one edge, sun-bleached. Faded lettering barely showed.
Property of T68 PNW Council. The initials were scratched, but between two gouges, HENDR. Colleen closed her notebook slowly. Everything in the cabin screamed one thing: they hadn't died quickly. Back in town, an old man came forward. John Rasp, retired USFS Ranger. "I remember Denning," he said. "What do you remember?" Mercer asked. "He was meticulous, never used trails, had his own system, bypass routes, all terrain, carried a stove on his back." "Did he ever mention Eagle Hollow?" "No," the man said, "but he never let anyone follow him west." "Why?" "He called it the silent side, said people didn't come back from there." "Did you believe him?" "No." "But now?" John Rasp didn't answer. That night, Mercer stood in the cabin alone. The wind scraped the shutters. Ash hung in the air. She looked at the meat hooks. Then at the nail beside the door, empty, rusted. A single thread still clung to it. Blue nylon. "Who did you hang there?" she whispered. But the silence was total. The cabin had already spoken, and it said enough. In March 2010, 2 weeks after Jack Denning's body was found, Colleen Mercer drove north into the Cascades to meet a man who'd once shared a hunting lease with him. Ray Melton, 62, used to guide tourists through summer valleys. He hadn't seen Denning since '07, but he remembered his habits. "Always packed light," Ray said, pouring coffee into a cracked thermos. "Didn't eat what others ate. Carried dry salt and jerky he made himself. Wouldn't say where he smoked it." Colleen showed him a photo of the cabin stove. "That's his," Ray said immediately. "He had that thing custom built." "Did he ever talk about Eagle Hollow?" Ray nodded slowly. "He said it was where you go if you never want to be found." Meanwhile, back at the site, cadaver dog units returned. The snowpack had shifted, revealing a new depression near a half-collapsed slope behind the cabin. The dog, Sable, 7 years old, veteran of 20 recoveries, stopped abruptly and lay flat. Forensics arrived within an hour. They dug carefully, down 6 feet, and there, wedged between frost-hardened roots, lay bones. At first small, then longer, burned at the ends, curled. Beside them, a tarnished zipper, nylon. Inside a rusted coffee can buried nearby, they found the remains of a child's sneaker, charred, but intact enough to show the logo. Size, Youth 5. Brand, Champion. Color, red with gray trim. Luke's. His mother had bought them the day before the trip. Soil samples were extracted. The surrounding area showed high levels of phosphorus and fat absorption, the signature of long-term decomposition in a closed environment. Likely a shallow grave, reused. In total, they recovered over 80 bone fragments. Less than half were human. The rest, rabbit, bird, squirrel. Same diet pattern as in the cabin. The fire had destroyed identities, but not timelines. At least one human had died after the fire was long cold. The forensics team also found something else. Wedged between stones and what had once been a corner foundation, a button. Plastic, dark blue, embossed with a tiny anchor. Standard issue on Cub Scout uniforms. Blood traces still clung to the threading. It had been torn, not fallen. Jack Denning's apartment, sealed by the coroner's office after his death, contained few personal effects. But a search team found a set of detailed trail maps, hand-annotated, elevation notations, weather scrawls, and along one fold, coordinates. 43.2297 degrees N, 121.7851 degrees W. The marker read, Smoke Well, Barry W. They checked satellite data. That exact point lay beneath a glacial shelf. The phrase haunted Colleen all night. Barry W. West? Wood? Witness? Or a name? The team returned to the marker site. The trail was gone, buried under rock slide. But GPS got them close. They found disturbed earth. And a lid. Metal, flat, covered in soil. It took them 2 hours to dig it free. A hatch, leading to a root cellar. Inside, rot, decay, animal bones. And one unmistakable item. A scout handbook. Water damaged, torn. On the inside cover, barely legible. M. Hendricks. When they opened it wider, something fell out. A photo. Cracked, weather-stained. It showed 2 boys kneeling by a creek, smiling. Behind them, a man's shadow, arms crossed, standing behind smoke. The picture had been torn. Just a corner remained of the man's face. But the shoulder tattoo was visible. Same as Denning's DMV photo. A wolf's head. That night, Colleen called Marcia Hendricks. "I need to ask something," she said. "Did Luke or Mason ever keep a diary?" There was a pause. "They used to write in a notebook," Marcia said quietly. "Luke did, mostly. He called it their trip log." "Do you still have it?" "No, it was in their pack." The pack was never found. Until the next morning. The thermal team swept the lower ridge near the stream. Under a fallen cedar, 20 feet from the creek, they located a synthetic strap. It led to a shredded backpack, half-eaten by time. Inside, a rusted compass, a cracked whistle, 2 Cliff Bars, a broken pencil, and 5 pages of lined paper, still legible. Page 1. Day 1. Snow's too thick. Mason wants to go back. We saw smoke. Headed uphill. Page 2. The man said he had food. Mason's foot hurts. He says we can rest. The last page. He made us sleep near the stove. We're not allowed outside. Mason's scared. He cried last night. I pretended I was asleep. Colleen closed the notebook slowly. The pages were stiff, cold, but the words still burned. The photo felt like the end. 2 boys at the creek, Denning's shadow behind them. Motive, location remains. The DA was ready to close, but Colleen Mercer couldn't. Something about the notebook was off. Page 3. Luke's writing shifted, shaky, rushed. He says it's safe now. Mason went to get firewood. I want to believe him. It wasn't a diary. It was a message. Rechecking the pack, they found a scrap of wool blanket. Hidden inside, a brass pin. When cleaned, it revealed, USFS Volunteer, RW. That wasn't Denning. It was Richard Westcott, volunteer, cabin builder, died 2009. But the cabin had been used after that. By whom? Under Denning's nails, foreign DNA, matched to Kurt Linney, 17, reported missing 2008. He'd fought someone before he died. Not a child, a teen. The pattern cracked. X-rays revealed glass in Denning's femur, windshield glass, from a Ford Ranger, Westcott's truck model. Denning had inherited more than a cabin. He'd likely killed Westcott. Then came the twist. Bone samples from the smoker weren't just burned. They were butchered. Parallel scoring, clean cuts. Not Denning's tools, someone else's. And one badge, melted in the debris, had only one initial, L, no M. Only Mason's body had been found. What if Luke wasn't dead? What if he'd stayed? Colleen returned to the cellar. In the ash, carved deep in the wall, L and, then nothing, just a smear and a handprint. Jack Denning never spoke about his early trail years. Not to neighbors, not to rangers, but in the mountaineering community, there were whispers. One of them, Owen Pike, had guided for 12 seasons. Quiet, lean, leather-skinned. He didn't like cops, but when he heard about the twins, he called Colleen. He knew trails no one else did, Owen said, would vanish for weeks, used caches, buried food, salt, tools. Did anyone else know about them? She asked. No, that was the point. Owen led them to one, buried under a rock overhang 40 minutes north of the cabin, a sealed ammo can. Inside, fire starter brick, 2 Mylar blankets, knife, jerky, a spiral notebook. The pages were warped, stained, but legible. First entries, weather notes. Later ones shifted. One line read, "One makes less noise than two." Another, "Smaller bodies dry faster." The handwriting matched Denning's, until page 6. Then it changed. Tighter, younger. "I don't want to be here anymore." Page 7. "He says I'm lucky. I don't feel lucky." Colleen sat in her cruiser staring at the notebook. There were 2 voices, one adult, one not, and one had clearly survived the other. She had the writing compared to Luke's schoolwork. Result, 84% match. But the date on the last page was late 2007, over a year after the boys vanished, meaning Luke had lived, at least that long. Another guide came forward, Kelly Moran, ran photo tours near Muckle Creek. Back in 2009, she'd met a man on a ridge trail, mid-20s, thin, quiet, carried nothing, spoke like he hadn't used words in years. He asked if I had a pen, she recalled. I gave him one. She showed the model, a black Vicon marker, same ink used in the creek photo inscription. Colleen asked what he did with it. He wrote something on his hand. What? Just 2 letters. Which? She hesitated. L and. That night they searched the ridge. No camp, no body. But inside a hollow tree, they found something. A child's drawing, pencil on cardboard, faded. 2 stick figures, one tall, one small. In the corner, a stove. Above them, falling lines. Snow. What if Luke never left? What if he grew up in silence? What if someone came after Denning and kept him? Forensics confirmed something strange. The cabin's lock had been replaced. Not Denning's noddle, more recent, installed between 2009 and 2010, by someone else. A new presence, a new threat. Colleen sat by the fire that night, rereading Luke's last notebook line. I want to go home, but I don't remember how. Inside Jack Denning's storage locker, cleared weeks after his death, detectives found only 1 box worth keeping, a weatherproof case labeled personal docs. It held nothing illegal, nothing overtly sinister, just receipts, dozens of them, all from the same hardware chain in Kalama, Washington. Dates spanned from February to April 2006. The purchases were odd: sodium nitrate, meat curing salts, a bolt cutter, and
3 separate times brown wax butcher paper in 150-foot rolls. When cross-referenced, one receipt stood out. March 6th.
3 days after Luke and Mason vanished. The item? Handheld vacuum sealer plus bag refill kit. Colleen stared at the receipt. He wasn't improvising. He was planning. Then came the deeper dig. The vacuum sealer kit was from a niche manufacturer. Each unit had a batch code. Denning's matched a machine found in the cabin. It still worked. Inside the machine's body cavity, one torn edge of a vacuum pouch. Burnt. Inside the melted plastic, a fragment of hair. Strands were tested. Mason Hendricks. Meanwhile, the team interviewed a retired postal clerk named Gary Holst. He'd worked in Crescent Harbor through 2007. "I remember Denning," Gary said. "Didn't talk much. Wore that green parka with the torn sleeve. Came in every March." "Did he mail anything?" Gary nodded. "One package. Always same box size. Same address." "To where?" He rifled through his logbook. "P.O. Box 402, Oakland, California." Colleen pulled the address. Box 402 was closed in 2008. No forwarding. But the rental ID was under the name Margot Tyne, a ghost. No driver's license, no bills, no tax records. Just one record. A landline disconnected the same week Denning died. Then a new name surfaced. Margot Tyne had once co-owned a wilderness prep school in Northern California. Shuttered in 2002 after multiple health code violations. The second co-owner? Richard Westcott. That was the link. Denning hadn't found the cabin. He'd been brought into it. By Westcott. Possibly trained. Then left to continue alone. Or not alone. Colleen requested a property search on all Westcott holdings. One flagged. An unlisted lot outside of Bend, Oregon. 2 acres. Dense pine. No structures on record. But a ranger aerial revealed something. A clearing. A burn scar. And in the middle, metal drums. She dispatched a unit. Inside the clearing, beneath rusted tarps, the team found 4 50-gallon drums, 2 empty propane tanks, a charred mattress spring, and a milk crate filled with burned documents. Most were unreadable. But one envelope survived, scorched at the edges. Inside, a Polaroid. 2 boys, snow in background, hands tied in front. One stared straight at the lens. Luke. Colleen held the photo under gloved fingers. It was dated on the back, 3/8/06, meaning the boys had lived days after being declared lost. Long enough to be posed, long enough to be documented. In another drum, under soaked paper pulp, they found 3 waterproof tags. Mason, Luke, Kurt. Someone had been keeping track, labeling them. That night, Colleen sat alone at her desk, flipping through old statements from Marcia Hendricks. "I think Luke would have protected Mason," she'd said once. "He always looked out for him. Even when they fought, he'd check if Mason had zipped his coat. That's just who he was." She closed the folder and whispered, "Did you protect him, Luke? Or did you watch it happen?" They brought Jack Denning in on a Thursday. Voluntary questioning. He showed up early, dressed plain, hair combed. He sat down without prompting. The interview lasted 48 minutes. He denied everything. "I haven't used that cabin in years. I never saw those boys. I don't know who Westcott is." But his pulse told a different story. Elevated, clipped sentences. And once, when they showed him the Thermos photo, his mouth opened slightly before he spoke. A half breath. A tell. Colleen stepped into the hall after the interview. Her partner, Duval, stood waiting. "He's lying." "Obviously," Duval replied. But not scared. Not yet. The next morning, Denning's truck was found abandoned at the trailhead. Inside, his parka, his boots. Engine off. Keys still in the ignition. No note. 2 days later, a hiker found him in a ravine, face down. Face down. Hands blue. Feet bare.
Frostbite had eaten his fingers. He tried to cauterize the stumps with a lighter. Failed. Autopsy said exposure. But the coroner noted something else. A jagged wound on his lower abdomen. Shallow. Precise. A blade had pressed, but not stabbed. A message. Or a warning. Back at the cabin, Mercer requested a new sweep. The snow had melted enough to expose what was beneath the floorboards. They pulled up the old planks, found a crawl space, empty, except for one object, a camping mirror. On the glass, a smeared fingerprint, blood. Too degraded for a full print, but ridge patterns matched Mason's right index. He'd been beneath the floor, alive, possibly hiding. Then a ranger called in. East of the old fire line, near a bend in Elkwash Creek, a local trapper had found something tangled in his line. Not an animal. A coat. Torn, rotted, pinned to a branch. Inside one pocket, a photo. A new one. Not staged. Taken in secret. It showed a figure, man or teen, half hidden behind a fallen tree. Long hair. Sunken eyes. Holding something in his hand. A lighter. Brand Vicon. The same lighter model Denning was issued at Westcott's camp in '05. But this one had initials scratched into the side. L.H.
Luke Hendricks. The photo couldn't be dated precisely, but film analysis suggested it was exposed within the last 18 months, meaning someone survived the cabin, and someone still walked these woods. Colleen stared at the photo for hours. Could Luke be alive? If so, what did he become? Victim? Witness? Accomplice? She returned to the smoker pit that night, alone. Only the snow and pine creeks accompanied her. In the ash, she knelt, pressed her fingers to the earth, and whispered, "Are you still out here?" Behind her, a branch cracked. She turned. No one. But pinned to a low tree branch, a strip of wax paper, red ink, smudged, L.M. The Ford Ranger was impounded months ago. Denning had never reported owning one. DMV showed no title. But a ranger remembered it. A rust-colored '94 model, parked near Willow Hollow in 2007. The property had since changed hands, but the truck sat abandoned in a nearby barn, covered in dust, battery long dead. It matched the windshield glass found in Denning's leg. Colleen ordered it open. The driver's seat was collapsed, cabin full of rodent nests. But beneath the paneling, melted foam, burned plastic. Tex found it. A blackened cavity under the floor mat. Inside, a clump of fabric fused with metal. And, embedded in the scorched foam, tooth enamel. 2 fragments. No jaw. Just crown and root. DNA confirmed it. Luke Hendricks. But it didn't make sense. Colleen paced the lab. "You're telling me he was burned here?" The forensic analyst shook his head. Not enough mass, no tissue, just 2 teeth. Then how did they end up under melted flooring? High heat, localized, like someone tried to destroy something, fast. But didn't finish? She leaned closer to the enamel under microscope. Both molars were juvenile, meaning Luke lost them before 13. Meaning they'd been kept, preserved, then burned, possibly moved, from the cabin or to it. Duval found the final piece, a melted segment of cassette tape, inside the glove compartment. No label, no casing, just ribbon curled and scorched. But audio techs recovered 6 seconds. The sound? Wind. Crackling. Then 2 voices. A boy. "Don't, please." Then another. "Say it." Static. Then, "Say who you are." Colleen stood frozen. She'd heard Luke's voice before, on old school videos. It matched. The tape was real. She played it again. The second voice? Unclear. Older. But not Denning. Then she remembered the drawing found in the tree hollow. 2 stick figures, one tall, one small. In the corner, a stove, and overhead, snow. But between the figures, one faint line,
a tether, a leash. They'd assumed Denning was the monster, but someone else gave the orders. Someone who stayed hidden. Someone who told Luke, "Say who you are." Colleen returned to the cabin one last time. Under the stove, she found it. A carving in the baseboard. Crude, knife-scratched. "I am not him." The cabin had one room, one stove, one trapdoor. But something about the floor was wrong. The planks near the western wall had a gap, off alignment, shallow groove. Not a trapdoor, a seal. Colleen and the recovery team returned with sonar. Below the floor, a hollow, 18 inches deep, 6 feet wide. They dug and found it. An ammo box, sealed, wrapped in plastic, triple layered. Inside, papers, photos, and a journal. Not Denning's, not Luke's. Handwriting, careful, measured, older. The name on the inside cover, Richard Westcott. The first entries were routine, weather, repairs, meat curing ratios. Then, late March 2006. 2 boys arrived today, said they were cold. I fed them. One is sick, the other watches everything. Denning says they'll leave soon, but the quiet one, he understands. Denning hadn't taken the twins alone. He'd brought them to someone, to a mentor, to Westcott. The journal unraveled everything. How Westcott had trained Denning, how they'd practiced living post-collapse, how cleaning the mind began with fasting, silence, obedience, how the boys resisted, at first. Then Luke stopped speaking. Mason cried every night, until he didn't. April 2006. Mason won't eat. Denning says it's time. I disagreed. He did it anyway. Then, Luke didn't speak for 3 days. Then he asked for salt. Colleen closed the journal. Her hands shook. Inside the box was a final item, a photo. Luke, alone, in front of the stove. Shaved head, hands tied. But he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking past it. Expression flat, blank. Behind him, barely visible, stood a shadow, taller than Denning. Forensics scanned the photo. Image enhancement revealed a patch on the shadow's jacket. USF, Emergency Volunteer, Westcott, alive. 3 months after his supposed disappearance. So, he hadn't died in 2009.
Or he did, and not alone. Someone else wore the patch after. Someone else took Luke's leash. Then came the twist. Inside a rusted storage chest buried near the smoke pit, cadaver dogs found fabric. Baby blue. Children's sizing. A winter jacket. Tag still stitched. L. Hendricks. But the inside liner was cut. And behind it, taped, a photo. 2 boys at a creek, smiling, holding fish. No ropes, no smoke, no shadow. Dated 3/2/06, the day before they vanished. It hadn't always been terror. They'd been happy, once. Colleen stared at the image for a long time. Luke was looking straight into the camera, not afraid, not broken, just a boy. And behind him, not a man, a mountain. She whispered, "Where did you go, Luke?" The pines didn't answer, but somewhere between ash and ice, a truth waited. 3 years after the case was closed, a volunteer clearing brush near Redfern Hollow stumbled on something hard beneath the roots. It was a boot, child-sized, red with gray trim, youth size 6, the twin to Luke Hendricks's last known pair. Inside, wrapped in plastic, a note, written in pencil, weather-stained but legible. I didn't forget. I waited. He left and I ran. I made it past the ridge, but I got turned around. Mason's voice was gone. I tried to go back, but the smoke was wrong. He said I was someone else now, but I'm not.
I'm Luke." The note ended with 2 scratched letters, L and M. They closed the file after that. Official ruling, multiple homicides. Responsible parties, deceased. Cabin destroyed. But locals knew better. The trailhead went quiet. Some said you could still see smoke through the trees. Others claimed they heard whispers near the creek, 2 voices, or maybe just one, practicing both names. Years later, a wooden cross was placed at the clearing. No inscription, just initials burned into the wood, L and M. Below it, hikers sometimes left small offerings, red thread, tiny fish carvings, salt packets. No one ever found Luke's body, but some say a man still walks the old bypass trails, watches hikers from the ridge, carries nothing, leaves no tracks, and if you listen closely near the frozen creeks, you might hear him say it, "I am not him."